Hello everyone, it's Crispy Patty. How are you doing? Look at this book that I have, The Velveteen Rabbit, or How Toys Become Real, by Margery Williams, illustrated by Loretta Krupinski. Now, this is quite a tale. It's not a short one, so nestle in, snuggle up to, get ready for bed, or lay down on the couch, or go outside or go on a long car ride. Or this one's a long story, but it's a great story. It's a classic. Do you know what a classic means? Classic means that every generation, probably your mom or your aunt or your uncle or your grandfather and your great-grandfather, depending on how old you are, have probably had this book read to them, or they've read it. So let's jump into it. This is a classic. There was once a Velveteen Rabbit. In the beginning, he was really splendid. He was fat and bunchy, as a rabbit should be. His coat was spotted brown and white. He had real thread whiskers, and his ears were lined with pink satin. On Christmas morning, when he sat wedged in the top of the boy's stocking, with a sprig of holly between his paws, the effect was charming. There were other things in the stocking, nuts and oranges and a toy engine, chocolate almonds and a clockwork mouse, but the rabbit was quite the best of all. For at least 2 hours the boy loved him, and then aunts and uncles came to dinner, and there was a great rustling of parcels, and in the excitement of looking at all the new presents, the Velveteen Rabbit was forgotten. For a long time he lived in the toy cupboard or on the nursery floor, and no one thought very much about him. He was naturally shy, and being only made of velveteen, some of the more expensive toys quite naturally snubbed him. The only person who was kind to him at all was the Skin Horse. The Skin Horse had lived longer in the nursery than any other of the others. He was so old that his coat was bald in patches and showed the seams underneath. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away, and he knew that they were only toys, and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is a very strange and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced like the Skin Horse understand all about it. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day. "Real isn't how you are made," said the Skin Horse. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the Skin Horse, for he was always truthful. "When are you real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the Skin Horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints, and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you are real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand." "I suppose you are real," said the rabbit. "The boy's uncle made me real. That was a great many years ago." The rabbit sighed. He thought it would be a long time before this magic called real happened to him. He longed to become real, to know what it felt like. There was one person called Nana who ruled the nursery. Sometimes she took no notice of the playthings lying about, and sometimes, for no reason whatever, She went swooping about like a great wind and hustled them away in the cupboards. She called this tidying up, and the playthings all hated it. One evening when the boy was going to bed, he couldn't find the giant dog that always slept with him. Nana was in a hurry, so she simply looked about her, and seeing that the toy cupboard's door stood open, she made a swoop. "Here," she said, "take your old bunny. He'll do to sleep with you." And she dragged the rabbit out by one ear and put him into the boy's arms. That night, and for many nights after, the Velveteen Rabbit slept in the boy's bed. At first he found it rather uncomfortable, for the boy hugged him very tight, and sometimes he pushed him so far under the pillow that the rabbit could scarcely breathe. But very soon he grew to like it, and for the boy used to talk to him and made nice tunnels for him under the bedclothes that he said were like the burrows the real rabbits lived in. And when the boy dropped off to sleep, the rabbit would snuggle down close under his little warm chin and dream, with the boy's hands clasped close around him all night long. And so time went on. The little rabbit was very happy, so happy that he never noticed how his beautiful velveteen fur was getting shabbier and shabbier, and his tail was coming unsewn, and all the pink had rubbed off his nose where the boy had kissed him. Spring came, and they had long days in the garden, for wherever the boy went to, the rabbit went too. He had rides in the wheelbarrow and picnics on the grass, and lovely fairy huts built for him under the raspberry canes. Once the rabbit was left out on the lawn until long after dusk, and Nana had to come and look for him because the boy couldn't go to sleep unless he was there. He was wet, though, with dew, and Nana grumbled as she rubbed him off with a corner of her apron. "Fancy all this fuss for a toy," she said. The boy sat up in his bed and stretched out his hands. "Give me my bunny," he said. "You mustn't say that. He isn't a toy. He's real." The rabbit knew that what the skin horse had said was true at last. The magic had happened to him, and he was a toy no longer. He was real. That night he was almost too happy to sleep, and so much love stirred in his little sawdust heart that it almost burst. And into his bottom eyes there came a look of wisdom and beauty, so that even Nana noticed it in the next morning and said, "I declare, if that old bunny hasn't got quite a knowing expression." Near the house where they lived there was a wood, and in the long June evenings the boy liked to go there after tea to play. He took the Velveteen Rabbit with him and made the rabbit a little nest somewhere among the bracken. One evening, while the rabbit was lying there alone, he saw two strange beings creep out of the tall bracken near him. They were rabbits like himself, but quite furry and brand new. They must have been very well made, for their seams didn't show at all, and they changed shape in a queer way when they moved. One minute they were long and thin, and the next minute fat and bunchy, instead of always staying the same like he did. Their feet padded softly on the ground, and they crept quite close to him, twitching their noses while the rabbit stared hard to see which side the clockwork stuck out. For he knew that people who jump generally have something to wind them up. But he couldn't see it. They were evidently a new kind of rabbit altogether. They stared at him, and the little rabbit stared back, and all the time their noses twitched. "Why don't you come and play with us?" one of them asked. "I don't feel like it," said the rabbit. "Can you hop on your hind legs?" asked the furry rabbit. That was a dreadful question, for the Velveteen Rabbit had no hind legs at all. "I don't want to," he said again. But wild rabbits have very sharp eyes, and this one stretched out his neck and looked. "He hasn't got any legs! Fancy a rabbit without any hind legs!" And he began to laugh. Then the strange rabbit came quite close, wrinkled his nose, and suddenly flattened his ears and jumped backwards. "He doesn't even smell like right," he exclaimed. "He isn't even a rabbit at all. He isn't real." "I am real," said the rabbit. "The boy said so." Just then there was a sound of footsteps, and the two strange rabbits disappeared. "Come back and play with me," said the rabbit. "I know I am real." But there was no answer. The Velveteen Rabbit was all alone. Weeks passed, and the little rabbit grew very old and shabby, but the old boy loved him just as much. He loved him so hard that he loved almost all his whiskers off. The pink lining of his ears turned gray, and his spots faded. To the boy, he was always beautiful, and that was all that the little rabbit cared about. And then, one day, the boy was ill. His face grew very flushed, and he talked in his sleep, and his little body was so hot that it burned the rabbit when he held him close. Strange people came and went in the nursery. The light burned all night, and through it all the little Velveteen Rabbit lay there, hidden from sight to the bedclothes. He never stirred, for he was afraid that if they found him, someone might take him away, and he knew that the boy needed him. It was a long, weary time for the boy, who was too ill to play. But the rabbit snuggled down patiently and looked forward to the time when the boy should be well again. Presently the fever turned, and the boy got better. It was a bright, sunny morning, and the windows stood wide open. They had carried the boy outside, wrapped him in a shawl, and the little rabbit lay tangled up among the bedclothes, thinking. The boy was going to the seaside tomorrow. Everything was arranged, and now it only remained to carry out the doctor's orders. They talked about it all while the little rabbit lay under the bedclothes, with just his head peeping out, and listened. The room was to be disinfected, and all the books and toys that the boy had played with in bed must be burnt. Just then Nana caught sight of him. "How about this old bunny?" she asked. "That?" said the doctor. "Why, it's a mass of scarlet fever germs. Burn it at once." "What? Nonsense. Get him a new one. He mustn't have that any more." And so the little rabbit was put into a sack with the old picture books and a lot of rubbish, and carried out to the end of the garden behind the fowl house. This was a fine place to make a bonfire, only the gardener was just too busy then to attend to it. That night the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with. It was a splendid bunny, all white plush with real glass eyes, but the boy was too excited to care very much about it. For tomorrow he was going to the seaside, and that in itself was such a wonderful thing that he could think of nothing else. And while the boy was asleep, dreaming of the seaside, the little rabbit lay among the old picture books in the corner behind the fowl house, and he felt very lonely. He thought of those long sunlit hours in the garden, how happy they were, and great sadness came over him. Of what use was it to be loved and become real if it all ended like this? And a tear, a real tear, trickled down his little shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a strange thing happened, for where the tear had fallen a flower grew out of the ground. A mysterious flower, not at all like any that grew in the garden. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just lay there watching. And presently the blossom opened, and out of it there stepped a fairy. She was quite the loveliest fairy in the whole world, and there were flowers around her neck and in her hair, and her face was like the most perfect flower of all. And she came close to the little rabbit and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. I am the nursery magic fairy," she said. "I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. When they are old and worn out and the children don't need any more, then I come and take them away with me and turn them into real." "Wasn't I real before?" asked the little rabbit. "You were real to the boy," the fairy said, "because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone." Together they went into the wood. In an open glade in the woods, the rabbits danced with their shadows on the velvet grass, but when they saw the fairy, they had stopped dancing and stood around in a ring to stare at her. "I've brought you a new playfellow," said the fairy, and she kissed the little rabbit again and put him down on the grass. "Run and play, little rabbit," she said. But the little rabbit sat quite still, for when he saw all the wild rabbits dancing around him, he suddenly remembered about his hind legs. He did not know that when the fairy kissed him that last time, she had changed him altogether, and he might have sat there a long time too shy to move if just then something hadn't tickled his nose, and before he thought what he was doing, he lifted his hind toe to catch it. And he found that he actually had hind legs. Instead of dingy velveteen, he had a brown fur, soft and shiny, and his whiskers were so long that they brushed the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great that he went springing about the turf on them, jumping sideways, whirling round as the others did. He was a real rabbit at last. Autumn passed in winter, and in the spring, when the days grew warm and sunny, the boy went out to play in the wood behind the house. And while he was playing, two rabbits crept out of the bracken and peeped at him. One of them was brown all over, but the other one had strange markings under his fur, and as though long ago he had been spotted, and the spots still showed through. And about his little soft nose, his round black eyes, there was something familiar, so that the boy thought to himself, "Why, he looks just like my old bunny that was lost when I had scarlet fever." But he never knew that it really was his own bunny, come back to look at the child who had first helped him to be real. Well, that was it. Now, some of you might be asking, what is velveteen? Well, velveteen is a fabric that was to imitate velvet. So it was kind of a mixture of silk and cotton, is what they think or say. Now, you can see Margery Williams, the author, lived from 1881 to 1944. She authored works of fiction and nonfiction for adults, but she may be best known for her first children's book, The Velveteen Rabbit, published in 1922. So that's what I say. It's a classic. Many people have read this book. Your mom, your dad, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and even them before that, perhaps, depending on how old you are. And then Loretta Krupinski has illustrated many beautiful books for children, including her own adaptation of the classic story Heidi and Blue Water Journal, The Voyage of the Sea Tiger. She is an award-winning maritime painter, and her work is shown in many galleries and private collections in the United States. Oh, there you go. I hope you learned some things and enjoyed that book. I really did. And, well, if you don't have a rabbit in your plush or stuffy collection, maybe you need one, and then you can turn it into a real animal. But if you don't have a rabbit, whatever you're snuggling with at night, talk to it and love it, and rub all its whiskers off and fur, and it might turn into a real animal. And then you'll see it one day when you're walking through the park. Whoa! All right, see you later.